World Inquiry.
During the afternoon of July 18, 2007, at the peak of rush hour in the busy area of downtown Manhattan, an enormous steam explosion occurred, injuring several, and even resulted in one fatality. The explosion created a giant pillar of scalding steam over 1,000 feet high and left a 35-foot diameter hole in the ground that was about 15 feet deep. The blast could be felt in several buildings nearby, causing many of the occupants to panic and flee. The situation caused several blocks of the busy Manhattan borough to come to a complete standstill as a result of the ensuing chaos. In this episode, we'll examine the background leading up to the incident, explain the events as they unfolded during the disaster, investigate the causes of the violent explosion, and we'll go over the aftermath of who was responsible for the catastrophe. For centuries, a type of community-wide heat for buildings has been employed as a more efficient and less polluting method for heating, particularly in larger cities. In modern systems, the ability to provide cooling is also available. Such systems are known as district heating or heat networks. District heating is created by producing large amounts of steam in a heat-generating plant that is then distributed throughout a city or particular urban section via a system of large underground pipes. This offers a more advantageous method for heating or cooling a large number of buildings for a multitude of reasons. Efficiency is increased due to the number of different types of energy sources that can be used, such as fossil fuels, waste heat, and even renewable energy. Due to the large production of heat using these methods when compared with conventional localized heating systems used in each individual building, district heating reduces overall emissions, saves space in buildings, is much more cost-effective, and more reliable in the long run, as such systems are less susceptible to the more common failures of smaller, more inefficient systems. For these reasons, New York City is no exception when it comes to utilizing such a technology, and such a system has been in use there since 1882. The Con Edison Company, which provides Manhattan's district heating, was using an underground pipe that had been installed in 1924. As could be imagined, due to the age of this network of pipes, increased maintenance is required to keep these old systems operating. When the required upkeep is neglected for these aging units, disaster can strike. In this case, there were several factors that likely contributed to the incident. It was July 18th, 2007, on the bustling island of Manhattan. The vast majority of the population was heading home from their workday during the rush hour commute. It was just before 6 p.m. Underground, below the busy intersection of 41st Street and Lexington Avenue, there was an 83-year-old problem that was about to come to the surface and wreak havoc in the area. Suddenly, buildings in the area began to shake and rumble, causing many nearby as well as those inside the buildings to panic. Many began to flee the area in search of safety, away from the not yet known threat. It quickly became apparent that there had been some type of explosion, as a massive column of superheated steam was blasting out of the ground to over 1,000 feet high and out into the surrounding streets, towering above many of the nearby skyscrapers. Upon reports of the incident, the fire department initiated a second alarm response to the area. When they arrived and realized the severity of the problem, the response was quickly elevated to the highest level of a 5-alarm emergency, ultimately dispatching over 200 firefighters to the site. One of the immediate victims, a 23-year-old tow truck driver, who had been working directly over the site where the giant pillar of steam had erupted through the surface, caused him and his tow truck to suddenly be blown into the air higher than the top of a city bus, as one witness recalled, then being dropped back down about 25 feet down into the bottom of the crater. From this explosion, the tow truck driver was burned by the 400-degree steam.
I remember tripping and falling and just, rolling on the floor, screaming in pain, agony.
Fortunately, the man would survive, but had severe scalding burns to over 80% of his body, requiring him to spend a long time in the hospital after being put into a medically induced coma to recover from his injuries. As the steam service utility company had now become fully aware of the situation, all available Con Edison workers were required to double over on their shifts, as the company had categorized their response as an all-hands-on-duty effort to combat the problem. In an effort to keep the nearby community safe and minimize further collateral damage, the police department cordoned off a several block sector of Manhattan, from 43rd to 40th Streets, north and south, and 3rd to Vanderbilt Avenues, east and west, completely closing it off to pedestrians. This meant that people who were already in the containment area when the accident occurred were not allowed to leave, preventing many from returning to their homes in the area, while also preventing many others from returning to work in the area the following day. Due to the obvious hazards, in addition to preventing foot traffic nearby, police were also forced to close off several streets near the disaster to vehicular traffic as well. The giant man-made geyser in the middle of Manhattan continued to blast steam skyward for the next 2 hours before the eruption was finally under control. It wasn't until this time that the fire department sounded an additional 6th alarm to relieve firefighters already on site, as the situation had now been determined to be secure. Some of the immediate effects of the massive 2-foot diameter ruptured steam line was an obvious disconnection with steam service to about 20 buildings, telephone and internet service disruptions, as well as public transportation services coming to a halt in the area, such as some of the bus and subway systems. All told, a total of 45 people were injured, 2 of them critically, and unfortunately, a woman's life would be claimed indirectly due to the disaster as she ran and fled from the scene, but suffered a heart attack that would prove to be fatal. Cleanup for the disaster was scheduled to take well over a week, and Con Edison would ultimately end up spending over $37 million in damages, not counting the numerous lawsuits that the company would soon be faced with. Investigations began shortly after the incident, which would turn up several possible reasons for the catastrophe. Although they were severely hindered due to the tow truck that had fallen into the crater, blocking off the exact point where the problem first occurred. Further slowing down the recovery operations was the fact that the 83-year-old pipe that had ruptured was insulated with asbestos, potentially contaminating the area with the deadly carcinogen, preventing teams of investigators from accessing the site. Many hypotheses were suggested as potential causes to the rupturing of the steam line, one of which was hydraulic shock, or in this case steam hammer, which is an extreme change in pressure due to the enormous amount of steam passing through the pipes, suddenly being stopped due to a blockage or an abrupt change in direction. Another suggestion was cold water from the heavy amount of rain that day had come into contact with the outdated and very hot cast iron steam pipe, possibly causing the metal to crack and finally give way and rupture completely. However, all investigations had finally been concluded by December 18th of that year, and a handful of issues were found to be the cause or at least contributing factors to the explosion. The official investigation reports cited insufficient repair work that had been done by a contracted company during the time leading up to the incident. It was discovered that excess sealant had been applied to a leaky joint for repairing the pipe, which then broke loose and moved within the pipe system down to a pair of steam trap valves, preventing them from draining excess water, thus causing a serious clog. This was exacerbated by the rains that day, causing massive amounts of condensation within the steam pipes, which were now unable to be drained due to the clog. Because of this blockage, pressure began to build up to the breaking point, eventually causing the 83-year-old pipe to burst with extreme force, which was ultimately the main cause of the disaster. Due to many businesses in the area having to go on lockdown, estimates were put in excess of $30 million of a financial loss in productivity and revenue. Con Edison was also forced to replace over 1,600 steam trap valves as a precaution in an effort to prevent such an incident from occurring again. Cancer-causing asbestos was also feared to have been blown into the air and all over the surrounding area when the pipe ruptured, potentially contaminating the area and being inhaled by many people near the explosion. Officials announced that no airborne particles of asbestos were detected in the air and that it all had been contained within the solid pieces of debris at the site of the rupture. But with valid reasons, many didn't trust or believe this, as the public was given false air quality reports before, particularly during the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. Many lawsuits were lodged against Con Edison following the accident. One by a woman who had been traumatized by the explosion, having been reminded of how she had lost her sister during the September 11th attacks. Another lawsuit by the family of the tow truck driver, filed about 2 weeks after the incident. Another by a woman who was severely injured during the panic that ensued during the tragedy, having been trampled by people running away from the chaotic scene of the explosion. The woman later required several surgeries to her injured ankle and knee as a result. During the hearings that would follow, Con Edison was under great scrutiny, suggesting confidence had been lost in the company, causing the New York City Council to threaten to break up the company and end its monopoly of its steam service for Manhattan. Ultimately, many of the resulting lawsuits would be settled by Con Edison out of court, and the company would also be able to continue to provide its steam service. Although the damage had already been done to the company politically, financially, and in the community's trust, as well as to the Con Edison public image. In an effort to avoid such a disaster again, many other large cities reevaluated their steam service utilities after the incident. However, many of these efforts were merely political ploys to bolster a push for regulated steam services instead of privatized companies to place such funding within government control instead of the private sector. Other cities took the opportunity to boast about the safety of their own systems, claiming to have a safer track record. Although, there have been several steam pipe burst incidents in the past, and unfortunately there will likely be more in the future. One such incident occurred in Philadelphia, ironically one of the very cities that chose to highlight the safety of their steam distribution system. There in 1989, a steam explosion had occurred that launched debris into the air and damaged some vehicles. Fortunately, no injuries were reported. Another incident occurred in Boston just a couple months prior to New York's explosion, resulting in a young boy being scalded by the steam. While district heating steam systems have long been heralded for their efficiency and ability to provide centralized heating, they continue to raise concerns regarding their safety in today's world. It will always be crucial for companies to maintain such systems and even seek safer alternatives in the future to help prevent such incidents from occurring. Ultimately, the future of district heating must involve a careful balance between innovation, safety, and environmental responsibility to secure a reliable energy source for urban populations.
I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please give the video a like, as this really helps the channel to grow, and it also tells us what kind of content our viewers want to watch. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe so you can be notified when more interesting content is released. Feel free to connect with us on social media as well. Thank you so much for watching. As always, your support is greatly appreciated,